I know the anniversary is on everybody's mind as well as the upcoming summer banners, but if you'll recall, I was doing these ranking videos leading up to the anniversary, and I'd like to get back to doing them because it allows me to not only do some number crunching, which I love doing, but I also get an excuse to use servants I don't usually get to crack out all that often. Plus, it always stirs a very interesting conversation in the comments down below. So for this video, we're going to be taking a look at the 5-star Buster AoE Sabers, and after this one, we are going to pivot off to a different card type and a different class. So if there's a particular class type combination that you would like to see, put that in the comments down below. But to specify what units are going to be ranked in this top 5 technically, it's going to be Melusine, Ereshkigal, Romulus, Cara, and Lancer Artoria, and that is one of the elephants in the room is Melusine, because not only is she a Buster AoE Lancer, but she's also a single target Arts Lancer as well. So to make things a little bit more fair for the other contenders in this video, we're going to be taking away her ability to be a single target Arts Lancer, and she's going to start off in her 3rd Ascension, which realistically just takes away her ability to use Black Grail with the 100% battery, but she still had a very impressive performance, as you'll see later on in this video, and is potentially still number 1. So strap in, get comfortable, as we start to dive into this video, starting off with our number 5 position. It is with a heavy heart that I have to put Lancer Artoria at the number 5 position. As you guys are surely able to tell by the gameplay going on in the background, I like her a little bit, enough to go ahead and grail her despite her not being the best servant. You know, just goes to show that you can grail who you like and not who's exactly meta. I mean, I already like Artoria and they essentially supersized her, so what is there not to love? And her kit is fairly decent. It was better than I thought it was going to perform because, again, even though I love her to bits, I haven't really used Lancer Artoria very often. I mean, when you've got an NP5 Morgan laying around, you don't really need to use anybody else. But while she did perform better than I was expecting her to do, it also wasn't quite nearly enough to bump her into the number 4 position, even though she does have 2 pretty decent power mods. Chaotic and Evil are both fairly common amongst servants, and you can easily pair those together against Chaotic Evil enemies, but the thing that's really unfortunate for her is that you don't really have a whole lot of free quest enemies that have the Chaotic alignment, if really any that you're going to run into using Lancer Artoria. Evil is pretty abundant, as I'm showing in the background. All of them are fighting the Kali enemies who are evil aligned, and with that she was able to hit about 400,000 damage on average, which is not bad. You know, that will get you through pretty much any free quest. It'll get you through 90+ farming. That's not bad. But unfortunately, with the advent of 90++ nodes that are going to be coming in about the next week or so over here on the NA side of things, that's just no longer going to be good enough, with the final enemies in these nodes being anywhere from 900,000 to about 1.1 million. 400k is not cutting it, especially with your power mod. And it'd be really hard to also get any value out of her to take out some of these smaller enemies in these 90++ nodes, because even some of the smaller enemies can be anywhere from 300 to 500,000. And again, because those enemies are usually free quest enemies, you can't even double up with the chaotic and evil buffs on them. You'll probably just be relying on the evil one, and keep in mind that 400k average damage is with cranking and with Oberon using his 3rd skill on Lancer Artoria, which you're probably not going to do in most 90++ scenarios. But the thing is, if they wanted to toss her a buff, especially in the style that they have been over on the JP side of things, where these buffs seem to be targeted at making these servants a lot better, you know, going after the parts of them that are a bit weak and just completely doing an Uno reverse and making them very strong. Look at Saber Nero or Ryder Constantine. So I don't have a doubt that if they did want to toss her a buff, she could easily be the 4th or 3rd best Lancer on this list, because the base ground that she has is strong. A 50% battery is always going to be good. Her own mana burst, plus again 2 decent power mods, plus with some challenge quest applicability and the ability to pierce invincibility on her NP, so you always have that live, and the ability to cleanse her own debuffs, she's not looking bad. You know, she's definitely one solid buff away from being a very, very solid servant, but unfortunately right now she's not looking too hot, and especially is just not beating out the guy that's in front of her. Coming in 4th place is going to be Cara. Now, don't judge the background gameplay. I'm in a very weird position when it comes to recording stuff for Cara. Over on the JP side of things, where he has his buff, I don't have Koyenskaya, so I can't fully show him off there with his new 30% battery buff. And over on the NA side of things, I mean, I have him at NP2, but, well, he obviously doesn't have his buff. He'll be getting that next year, so do keep in mind that that is a little bit of goofiness going on in the background, but I do think I was able, at least on the NA side, able to kind of replicate what it would look like to do Cara farming with the double Koyenskaya and Oberon, thanks to Arash being as good as he is, and effectively being a free plug suit. That being said, Cara just kinda has every advantage over Lancer Artoria, except with the battery. With his battery currently being 25% and later getting upgraded to 30%, he will be able to do buster farming, but in some really weird, multi-core scenarios, or in some challenge quest scenarios where you need that extra 20%. And the Pierce invincibility is also very nice when going into challenge quests, but let's be honest, who is bringing either of these two into CQs? I mean, I think the Arjuna Altar boss fight where they had to give this guy a myriad of buffs just so he could get through, and he still kind of gets wrecked by that boss fight, shows that these are really not CQ-oriented servants. Damage-wise, Cara was hitting up to about 480,000 to 500,000 in testing, so he is doing significantly more damage than Lancer Artoria, and that is for two different reasons. One is Mana Burst is a lot better, split into a 30% Buster buff and a 20% NP damage buff. This not only lets him play nicer with Oberon, but also having split damage buffs due to FGO's damage calculation is better to have. It ends up giving you more damage in the long run. And then there's his power mod, which is just straight up better. Even if you have both of Lancer Artoria's power mods going, that's only 100% extra damage with both of those up. Cara starts at 150% with the Divinity power mod, which is also arguably just better than having Chaotic and Evil anyways, because of all the servants that are on Divinity and all of the free quest enemies that also share the Divinity trait. There's also the fact that he applies a Buster down before he does his damage as well to further increase the amount of damage he's doing, plus he has an upgraded NP, so his damage scaling is also just innately higher. Then there's also the fact that his third skill not only fixes the battery, but it also comes packing with a crit star gen buff and a critical damage buff to supplement his NP damage, which is already rather high. And so now on top of all of that, he can even do some pretty nice crits. And while Lancer Artoria pretty much has no survivability, Cara technically does have a method of survivability in the ability to seal the enemy's NP if you need that extra turn to either get, say, Merlin's illusion skill up so you can protect the entire party that way, or if you need the extra skill to, say, get Koyenskaya's skills back, so then you can close out the fight, something along those lines. It technically is some form of party support and survivability. But don't misunderstand, even though I do believe Cara to be better than Lancer Artoria, if we were doing a tier list with just the servants in this video, let me specify that, if we were doing a tier list with just these guys, they would both be sitting in C tier. It would be Cara at the top of C, Lancer Artoria at the bottom of C, because they both still have quite a few problems. It's just Cara's in a much better position than Lancer Artoria is. Romulus is one of those servants that prior to making this video, I hadn't really gotten to use very much, and so I was very excited to crack him out for this video, and he definitely did not disappoint. Now, he is one of those servants that I did roll for on a whim because I really wasn't too interested in him when he released, and then after reading Lost Belt 5.2, I'm not gonna lie, I do find Caligula to be a bit more entertaining in that story chapter because he goes from the ranting madman into the ranting wise philosopher, which I find to be a lot more funny, especially since Romulus was only on screen for like 5.5 seconds. Now that 70% of the commenters are going to be absolutely salty from that take, let's go ahead and start getting into what Romulus does. I think he is one of the most well-balanced servants on this list. That is because he doubles as a DPS and a support, although I don't think he does either exceptionally well. He does them well enough to warrant the number 3 position. Again, if we're using the tier list example, I do think he's a solid few tiers above Cara and Lancer Artoria, sitting at about A tier if I were to rank them, again, using only the servants in this video. I mean, the ability to not only do nice crits himself, but having proper survivability in the invincibility skill that he has, plus the 30% battery, giving attack and crit damage to the party, as well as pretty much having his own power mod by turning the enemies into Romans, he's just overall a very, very solid servant. And with his damage numbers being anywhere from about 440,000 to 520,000, he's also just got some good damage. Now, you will see towards the third wave of the gameplay that I'm showing in the background, I do have to use a command spell for him. That is not because he's not able to do farming. My Romulus just doesn't have his append skill done, So instead of doing his append skill, which I don't even think I have the coins for, I just decided to run the thing as per usual and then use a command spell to simulate me having his append skill done. So don't take that as a knock against him. He still can do buster farming. You just have to do his append skill if you want to be using something like cranking. And I do find it to be rather impressive that even though Cara has this insanely massive power mod, the fact is Romulus is still able to get some numbers on him, which is not a bad feat for him, seeing as my Cara in this video is at NP2 and he's only at NP1. So the boy Romulus is really packing some heat, and again, while I do think he has a very well-rounded kit, the other two that are above him are just so cracked beyond belief that having what I would consider to be a very well-rounded and basic kit is not going to be enough to cover it, especially when in competition with the two above him. First and second place was very, very rough, because even without her 100% battery and ability to use Black Grail, that more so just evens the playing field between Melusine and Ereshkigal. And over the last few weeks that I've been, spending making this video, I have flip-flopped on who is number 1 and who is number 2 numerous times. But I think I have settled that Melusine, just as a Buster AoE Lancer starting in her 3rd Ascension, is a little bit worse than Ereshkigal. But again, we're talking about very minute discrepancies between the two of them. Because if Romulus has a very basic and just good kit, I think Melusine takes that and perfects it. Her first skill, giving her attack, defense, HP, and a 30% battery, is just a slew of very strong buffs. She provides her own stars and then absorbs them on her second skill. And then even though you don't get the 100% battery on the third skill, what you do get is an invincibility, which is survivability, which is always good going into challenge quests, but also you get a 30% NP damage buff. And since you can stack that with Koyenskaya, giving you the skill reductions, that becomes a 60% NP damage buff. You take Black Grail away from Melusine, and then she just gives it back to herself with her third skill. Plus, with Oberon's first skill himself, that becomes 80%. So now you just have a max limit broken Black Grail. So even if you try to take it away from her by starting her off in her 3rd Ascension, she still gets Black Grail, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. And her damage numbers reflect that, being anywhere from about 575,000 to 630,000. And that's only at NP1. I wish I could do this with my JP Melusine, because she's NP2 and is Grailed, plus fully gold foed. I would love to see the numbers she could hit if only I had Oberon and Koyenskaya over on the JP side of things, but she is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, even on her own NP, she's giving herself the Buster buff, and even though I usually rag on damage over time skills, since we do get random challenge quests every now and then that have like 99% damage reduction enemies, or we're now getting some advanced quests that have those, the burn that she has on her NP is not useless, because it can help you out in getting through those, and it helps that she's already a really good servant. You don't have to use somebody who's a bit more mid to get through those. Instead, you can use a very good servant like Melusine and do the damage over time, which is not nothing, especially considering that we now have a CE that gives you power mod if you're fighting burned enemies, which unfortunately Melusine does not apply the burn first. That would make this really nutty, but hey, if you want to, slap on some burn command codes, or you want to use this in a challenge quest or advanced quest setting, subsequent NPs will do more and more damage as you start stacking that burn on them. So Melusine is just good all around. I think the only reason she doesn't take the number 1 spot is because of how insanely good Ereshkigal actually is in pretty much every facet of the game. And I do want to make this clear, if we're talking about who is the best Lancer overall, I would give that to Melusine, because she's effectively 2 units in 1. It's the same reason that someone like UDK Barghest or Space Ishtar is very good. They're not just 1 unit. When you pull them, you get numerous units essentially. With Space Ishtar, you don't just get a very strong Arts Looper, but you also get a strong Buster Looper and a decently okay Quick Looper, we'll say. And with UDK Barghest, you don't just get a strong single target Arts Archer, you also get an AoE one that's, again, still very, very strong. Summoning for Melusine is getting a very solid Arts single target Lancer, and then arguably one of the best, if not the best in your opinion, Buster AoE Lancer. Again, if you wanted to slot Melusine above Ereshkigal, even just as a Buster AoE Lancer, I would get it. Remember, I was flip-flopping on this for the longest time, and it's why it took so long for this video to get released. But with that being said, I've pretty much all but admitted it, but let's move into our number 1 position. For some people, this conclusion was inevitable. Even if you give Melusine the ability to have the 100% battery and use Black Grail, for some people, they would probably still rank Ereshkigal at the number 1 position for a video like this, because she pretty much has a perfect kit. I mean, the last buff they gave her on the JP side pretty much shored up the last little flaws that she had, and that was that some of her effects on her first skill are chance-based, but now she can just now guaranteed get the debuff immunity, the insta-kill immunity, the buff removal resistance of 100% for a turn, while also having an invincibility for survivability, and then she reduces her skill cooldown by 1, which allows you to get to her 50% battery more consistently, or 50% buster buff more consistently, and then it allows you to slap on her really nutty charisma, which I'm going to call it, that gives the entire party 20% defense, 30% NP gain, 3k max HP, and then after you fire the NP, that Blessing of Cur buff then converts into a 20% attack buff, a 20% crit resistant buff for 3 turns, and then insta-kill immunity for 3 turns as well. Did I mention that she also just gives herself another small buster buff on her NP, while also just having arguably the best power mod in the game, that being Earth Attribute. The only thing that really rivals that is Man Attribute, because Earth and Man have not only a plethora of servants on them, but an insane amount of free quest enemies as well. There is pretty much nowhere where Yugioh is not bad. She just has a broken dummy nutty kit, and that's reflected as well with her damage. With the power mod up, she is doing about 650,000 damage, and even neutral with the power mod is 307,000. I mean, that is redonkulous. Keep in mind, the numbers for everybody else was taken against, super effective people, berserkers or archers, but for Yugioh, I wanted to take her type neutral and see how much damage she's doing. Remember, Lancer Artoria with her power mod is only at about 400,000. Yugioh is creeping up on her with neutral damage, which I think is dummy nutty broken. I think we deserve to call her that, right? And anybody that has used Yugioh knows how insane this servant is. Even before she started receiving her buffs, there was an infamous challenge quest at the time where you had to fight Summer Jean, Jaguar Man, and Summer Nobu, who would all change the various battlefields and give themselves different buffs and resistances depending on what battlefield was up, and it was hard for even built stacked accounts, but somehow Yugioh was able to brute force her way through that and solo the thing, which is ridiculous. I think that goes to show how good she was when she released, and now they're giving her more buffs. She does not need anything else. Maybe this is just the apology for us never getting Summer Yugioh, and that's why her base version is so good. They even chucked her a costume and said, okay, look, maybe we don't give you the summer version of her, take all of this stuff, take the costume, take the buffs, take all of this stuff. And so, in my opinion, I do think if we're looking at Buster AoE Lancers, she holds the crown. I think Melusine is a little bit further behind her, but, if we're using the tier list example, these two are definitely sitting in the S tier by themselves. There is nobody else that encroaches on them. They are both ridiculously good. I just happen to think that Yugioh, again, as a Buster AoE Lancer, does beat out on Melusine. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you were going to be doing a ranking video like this, how would you have done it? I know I didn't really do any honorable mentions in this one, but that's because all of the other lower rarity Buster AoE Lancers are not very good. Lancer Alter kind of just has the same issues as the normal Lancer Artoria. Jalter Lily is not very good. I mean, the best thing that she has going for her, she's a free NP5, and that was pretty nice in year 2, but is definitely fallen off a lot. Neza's not super great. Canis can do some pretty nice crits, but is really lacking in the damage department. Liz's whole niche of being able to double buff females was not very good years ago. And then Hector and Romulus I kind of just feel exist. I mean, they're fine, I suppose, but unlike Sabers that has Salter as a lower rarity unit, none of these guys really compare. So if you're wondering why there wasn't an honorable mention, yeah, that's kind of the reason why. There's not a whole lot of really good low rarity options for this video, but what video would you like to see next? Go ahead and drop that in the comments down below. Let me know the card type, the class, and maybe even the alignment. Are they going to be single targets, AoEs, supports? That's going to be up to you to decide. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace!